I'm at such a loss because I always imagined 3 pregnancies.
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't want this. Like, not that I didn't want twins, but I didn't want to miss the birth of my children. I so specifically wanted to feel that again after Walker, and I wanted to breastfeed. I wanted the skin on skin, and I missed so much of that. I remember seeing videos and I was like, I didn't get to do that because I had twins and I was attached to a wall pump and I couldn't hold them and I couldn't just lay in bed and look at every inch of their body, all of the details.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Birth Story podcast. If you are joining for the first time today, I'm your host, Alexis C. Girl mom, angel mama to one of the sweetest boys in heaven, birth trauma and uterine rupture survivor, and former NICU mama. Here you will have the opportunity to ask and have your burning questions answered by professionals, feel connected to other women's experiences as we normalize the different aspects of this journey we are on as moms. The real and raw moments of healing are shared here as we navigate loss, embrace strength, and find hope again while learning to live after loss. Please note the topics discussed on this podcast are for educational purposes only. Please see your personalized medical professional if you have any questions or concerns that arise from listening, including diagnosis and treatment. Okay, well, first and foremost, I'm so excited to hear that everybody in your family is healthy,
Yeah,
because I think
finally.
we can all agree that 'tis the season of germs entering our home and never wanting to leave. So
Absolutely.
that is a win in my world. And second, I'm so thankful that you took the time to find childcare to speak with me, and nonetheless on a Saturday. So
We are
that's
vibing.
amazing.
Yes. I
I'm
was like,
feeling really good about it.
yeah. I'm like, I have the house to myself for a few hours. This is amazing.
I love that for you. There's
Yeah.
no better way to do it. And this has been so fun for me to be able to connect with people from all over. But this one's super special because you're kind of the first person from, like, we both kind of grew up in Lloydminster. So it's
Yeah.
fun to be able to connect back and kind of circle back around and connect with our lives. And they're obviously so different these days, but I think that's part of the beauty in it.
I know, I think it's, like, really cool, like, I remember being in grade 8 and you were in grade 10 and we were in the same high school, and me and my friend were like, "Oh, Alexa did this side braid, like, I think I'm gonna do this side braid."
Okay.
You had a headband in and you were like, "Oh,
Of
it was
course
so
I
cute."
did. Yes,
Yes.
the headband. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That just made my
Yeah.
day.
Oh, yeah, it was good.
I love that. Okay, well, since you have childcare and I know you're a busy, busy mom, I'll get right to it. But do you want to just start by telling our listeners a little bit about who Robyn is?
Well, my name is Robyn Sword, and I now live in the Viking Bruce area on a farm. I'm a ranch mama. I have 3 babies. One just turned 2 in September, my oldest, and then I am a twin mom, and they are just about 10 months, 8.5 months adjusted. So we are busy over here.
No kidding.
Yeah.
For some reason, I didn't remember that your oldest was only 2. In my
Yeah.
head, they were so much older. Oh my goodness. All the power to
No.
you.
Yeah.
Wow. That is crazy. I often, like, a couple of my friends have had babies very, very close together. I'm just like, how in the world? And then, yeah, to not only have one, but 2 little ones and coming early nonetheless.
Yeah.
This year's probably been a little wild, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. They came at 34 weeks and 4 days is when they were born. So my age gap is only 18 months. So I battled 3 under 2 for 6 months. It was absolutely wild.
I think that's probably putting it a little bit lightly too, hey?
There were a lot of tears. Like,
No, yeah, from everybody involved.
yes, yeah, it wasn't
Not
just
just
me.
the kid. Just Oh my gosh. Can you walk us through the moment of when you found out you were twins? Like, do they run in your family?
Yeah, I have a
Okay.
couple cousins, like first cousins that had twins. So I had always felt like either myself or my sisters would have twins.
Mhm.
My great grandma's a twin, like my mom's cousins have twins. Like it's just very, very high on uh my side, which I guess twins come from me. But
Yeah.
yeah, so when I found out, I was alone at the ultrasound. Logan was at a wedding setting up. Like, it was just a Friday, and I was like, oh, I'll just go. We just need to figure out how far along I am because I honestly didn't really have any idea. I had only had one very short period from postpartum still. And so I was like, I don't know. And I go, and it's a male ultrasound tech, and he's like so quiet. And I'm like, "Okay, dude, like, this is awkward." He doesn't have the screen on for me to see, like, because it's my first ultrasound, just in case, like, something goes wrong. He's not showing me
Right.
anything. He's like, I just have to show you this." And I'm like, "Okay," my heart's, like, racing. I'm like, "Something's wrong."
Mhm.
And he turns the screen, and I just was like, "Oh." I knew instantly what I was looking at. I was like, "Twins?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's a good thing, it's a good thing." And I was like, "I'm not like." I was just like, "Of course. Like, of course it's twins." Like,
And of course, you have a male too who's just probably like,
yeah, he has
obviously
no
can't
idea.
relate. So
Yeah, he has no idea what to say, and he's just like, "Yeah, this is a good thing." I was like, "I know it's a good thing, but you could have brought this to me a little bit." Like, I thought I was gonna have, like, a miscarriage or something,
yeah.
and instead I'm having 2 babies, so I'm, like, trying to hold it together and not tell Logan, and I was like, "Oh, this would have been a good appointment for you to come to," and he's like, "Why, is it twins?" I was like,
How did you know?
yeah, so I called him. I couldn't even, like, wait till we were together, and he was just like, "Oh my gosh," and he just said, like, he couldn't stop smiling, like, we had no idea what we were in for at that moment, but
Oh, but that's so sweet
yeah,
that that's how he responded. Because I feel like,
yeah.
well, the last twin mom I talked to, she just said her husband cried a lot. That's probably what I would be doing too.
Yeah. It was like "Oh, wow," like, it wasn't, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how we're gonna do this." I mean, it had crossed my mind, but I was just like, "We thought with Walker it would be twins for some reason, so this
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily, like, a shock to us, but it was when we had them." Like, I don't think we ever fully adjusted to the idea that it was 2, like,
Mhm.
it was crazy.
And it's hard, I think, to know what that's going to entail until you're actually in it. I
Yes.
know growing up, I always wanted twins. They don't run in my family. Nobody's a twin. It's just like, one day I'm gonna have them. And now I see so many twin moms, and I'm like, yeah, it's a very amazing concept, but I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah, I've been, like, talking to a couple twin moms, and they're like, "It is not for the faint of heart." And I'm just like, it is the most, like, wild thing that you could ever experience, and I definitely think, like, being a twin mom, when you're going from your first to your second and third, is harder maybe, in my opinion,
Mhm.
than just having them right off the bat, because I have 1 baby, and he gets all of my attention, all of my love, like, and then all of a sudden I have to split that not only with 1 more, but 2 more. And I, like, don't have enough hands to hold them. I don't even know how to be a mom to 2, let alone 3. I don't know how to
Mhm.
split my time. Like, I found that, like, just such a hard adjustment where even if I had 2 kids at home, I would kind of know what is coming and how to split my time more.
That's true, yeah.
This was just such a shock to go from 1 baby getting absolutely, like, everything from you to trying to divide all of my time. It was so difficult. Like, I really struggled with that and just wanting almost to, like, go back to how it used to be.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I could
it d
definitely see that. That's a interesting perspective. I haven't heard anybody talk about that yet.
yeah.
I struggled a lot, yeah, going from just 1 to 2 and
Mhm.
splitting my time there,
Yeah.
and yeah, when Walker is your oldest, right? Sorry?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, okay. Yeah, and he's so young too to try and understand that mom needs to be kinda 2 other places, and I feel like as
Yeah.
moms too, you want to be everywhere, and you wanna be giving your all to everything, and your hands are so tied in those in situations like that, right?
Yeah. I just like well, and because we were in the NICU, I just remember wanting to leave. Like, I was
Mhm.
just like, "I'm just gonna pack up and go back to my old life," because I didn't know how to divide my time. Like, I just was in, like, the postpartum, like, your hormones are just all over the place. I had crazy baby blues. I'm in the
Mhm.
NICU, I'm not even with the baby, so for me, I was just like, "Well, I might as well just leave." Like,
Yeah.
but at the same time, the nurses are saying, "Oh, you can go home for a day or a night," and I was like, "Are you crazy? I'm not leaving my child here." Like, I remember getting so angry that they would say that, but in my heart being like, "I just want my old life back."
It's so hard. I know. They always tell you, like, "We got your baby. It's all good. Go take your time." And especially when you have babies at home.
Yeah.
And I was the same way. I would be so annoyed. I'm like, "Well, no, I can't. Like, I can't just leave my baby here." Like, that is so weird. Not that I don't trust you guys, because I do.
Yeah.
Just like even sleeping somewhere else without them. And like
Yeah.
knowing I'm going to get up in the morning and then I'm going to go visit them. I should be saying good night at home and not
Mhm.
goodbye and see you tomorrow, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really messes with you in that sense,
Mhm.
like, especially when someone is telling you, like, "Okay, like, go for lunch," and I'm like, "What do you mean go? I'm supposed to be right here, right beside this bed." Like, that's how it
Mhm.
works, and just, like, realizing that I can't be there 24/7, but not only that, but, like, you're not even sleeping there. It's so the most, like, strange, out of world experience.
And especially too if you have an older baby at home and that you've delivered and you have gone home, I
Mhm,
feel like that's the, in quotations, normal thing to do. And then when you're faced with this such abnormal situation, it's
mhm.
hard to wrap your head around. And obviously, we're so attached to our babies and they should be with us. And I know I often thought, like, I feel bad leaving him. Like, oh, he's probably going to be sad without me or something. And then I'm like, oh, wait, you don't
No.
know. You're nice and cozy in your incubator. And I'm like, it's more just me and my heart. But
Yeah.
yeah, that is so, so true. How were your pregnancies between Walker and having the twins? Like, were they quite different?
Yeah, I would definitely say, like, with Walker, for the first, like, 26 weeks, I was super textbook. I was healthy, I was able to, like, move my body, and once I got into the 3rd trimester, I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes, which with Walker, I did not take seriously. Like, I was just like, "Oh, so what? He's gonna be a big baby, cool, like,
Hmm.
maybe I'll have him early." That's like, I was just like, "Whatever, it's not a big deal," because, to be honest, like, my doctor didn't give me any sort of information on it other than, "Don't eat carbs and sugar, and that's how you live your life." I had just, like, gotten very big because he was 8 pounds, 7 ounces, but
Hmm.
my birth with him was amazing. I remember just, like, couldn't wait to give birth again because it was, like, the most amazing, life-changing experience, and, like, I didn't feel my contractions, like, my epidural was awesome. I was like, "This is the life." And then I
You were
just
on
got this
cloud nine.
literally, and I was, like, holding him, and I'm like, "Nobody touches this baby." Like, this baby is
Hmm.
my pride and joy, and then by the time I was, like, 13 weeks with the twins, I was already wearing a belly band because my stomach hurt so bad. Just, like, the pressure and, like, my uterus, like, growing so fast had, like,
Hmm.
just, like, caused so much pain. I had, like, pain in my side, and I think I went to the doctor at 16 weeks, and I was like, "Please test me early for gestational diabetes. I think I have it." And him being like, "Why would we test you early?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I didn't get tested. I think I finally went at, like, 24 weeks, and I was like, "Just do
Hmm.
the test, like, I know." And yeah, they called me that day, and they were like, "Yeah, you have to go back for your 3-hour test." And I was like, oh, okay, well, I already know I have it. I'll do it. But yeah, and I had it again. And um, at that point, I was just getting another ultrasound to just check the growth because it was twins and it had been a while. And so I was going to my doctor, and like I knew he was going to tell me all about my gestational diabetes, but I actually walked in and he was like, I cannot deliver you. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Because
Mm-hmm.
it had been like pretty textbook. They were die twins, which means two placentas, two sacs, like basically two pregnancies at the same time, like they're siblings. And he was like, no, you have abnormal amount of fluid in baby B's placenta, still within normal range, but a lot more than baby A. And there was like a little bit of cord pinching going on from the
Okay.
placenta to the baby. And so I had to like get sent to the specialists in Edmonton at the Royal Alex at the Robyn's Pavilion. And so they like started doing monitoring, and they had basically told me that we will take it like week by week. You now have gestational diabetes that puts you at high risk. Your twins, high risk. The cord flow is high risk, and your baby's placenta, just everything was kind of adding up into they weren't sure if I would make term or like what was going to happen. So it was just
Mm-hmm.
like monitoring every single week, like ultrasounds. And they were like 90 percentile twins. Like they were
Oh.
big. Like, and so I remember being like, oh, like, okay. Not really fully comprehending. And I remember family reaching out and being like, how was your appointment? And I was like, uh, my mom can explain it to you. I don't really know. I don't really know how to put it into words because I
Yeah.
was maybe in disbelief of like the complications that were kind of coming up.
Yeah.
I had to check my sugars 4 times a day, which I then got explained how serious it actually can be,
Mm-hmm.
and that there is a much higher rate of stillbirth with gestational diabetes than without, and they don't know why, was what the doctor had told me.
Mm-hmm.
And just if you're not following your diet, like it can cause some complications with the baby sugar. I could get actual diabetes type 2 within the next 5 years, and so could the babies, which I
Oh,
did not
really?
know. Yes. Yeah. And so I got like loaded up with information on that at the appointment. So I was like, yeah, I need to like take this like more seriously. And so I had been in check with my numbers, but I ended up having to get put on insulin at nighttime because I couldn't get my fasting numbers under control. And I don't think like a lot of people know this, but with gestational diabetes, your numbers have to be between 4.7 and 6.3 during the day. And your fasting number when you wake up in the morning has to be under 5.3. And so those numbers compared to regular diabetes are a lot tighter.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot harder to control diet-wise. And so that's the reason that I obviously went on insulin. Even with diet, I still wasn't necessarily a controlled number. And so that's a little bit more stressful. And the doctor had told me that even with perfect numbers, gestational diabetes can still cause a lot of issues. So between everything and having not even a 1.5-year-old at home, it was like I think, fully in denial. Like the only thing that I could control was like my eating.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like how I had taken it. And so I kept going to my weekly scans, and after every scan you meet with your doctor and they go over how your results are, like what everything looks. And the first two, it sounded like they were hoping to get me to 36 weeks, like things hadn't gotten any worse but not any better.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last two, they were like, you like things look great. Like, and they were like, we'll schedule you in for next week. And at my last ultrasound, I don't know if the doctor didn't read my file necessarily correctly, but she was like, there is nothing wrong with you. We really don't need to see you back for a couple weeks. Like everything looks great. And I was like, okay, but the babies were measuring like 3 weeks ahead, both of them. So
Wow.
like I was like, oh, okay. And I remember walking out with Logan and being like, I feel like they caused us so much stress if everything is fine. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, I know it sounds bad, but I'm angry that that's what they're telling me because we've been so confused this whole time. And now everything is just fine and there's nothing wrong with the cords. And on our way home, getting a call from the hospital saying that they had made a mistake and that I need to go back the
Oh
following
my
week.
gosh. Yeah.
And they didn't say like what the mistake was, but they were like, we do have to do another ultrasound. I was like, okay. And I think that she didn't maybe realize I did have gestational diabetes, and that's why they were monitoring also so closely.
Yeah.
And so I had scans like every Friday. And so I went for my last scan, and they were like, yeah, you definitely need still monitoring, but you do look like the restriction on the blood flow does look better. There's still a little bit more fluid in baby B's placenta, but or in his sac, but it's okay. It's not going above. So it's up to you if you want to do a scan on Friday or like in 10 days. So it'd be like the following Tuesday. And I was like, well, I see my doctor that day anyway, so I'll just wait. And they were like, you have to get a non-stress test next week regardless and see your OB back home. And so that week I went and I was sitting in the OB's office for like 2 hours, and they were like, we have to reschedule everyone because he's delivering a baby. And I was like, that's totally fine, but I have to get a non-stress test. Like, that's why I'm here, is for him to
Yeah.
send me for one. And so they just got one of the doctors there to send me up to the hospital. And I'm like so used to non-stress tests from my first where they were like 15 minutes and they were like, oh, healthy, healthy baby, get out of here. And I was there for
Yeah.
like an hour. And it's always harder with twins. Like you're trying to find two heartbeats. And the nurse came in after and she was just like, are you like feeling any tightening? And I was like, not really. And she was like, okay, well, like you're having consistent contractions. And I was like, oh. And I was like, so am I in labor? And she was like, no, but you might. Like it was very unclear. And so I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
Your
well,
body may be prepping.
yes. And so I was just like, well, that's like par for the course. Like I wasn't too worried about it. And
Yeah.
my doctor had just phoned and said like if he was like, I want to see you like early next week. And I was like, okay, like not a big deal. And so we drove home and I had felt like, I don't know, like slight like period cramps. But I was
Hmm.
like, but your uterus is growing. Like I have twins in there. I'm uncomfortable. And I was like, this is whatever. And the next day I had one and it was like 15 minutes long. And it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. But I also was like, I don't know, like this could be a Braxton Hicks contraction. Like that's actually coming on and I'm feeling them.
It's so hard to know.
Yes,
Like,
like
and to differentiate what should you be feeling and what maybe you shouldn't be feeling. And especially like what gestation were you at this point?
34 weeks and
Oh,
three
okay.
days.
Yeah.
Like
So
I was
yeah.
just like, Braxton Hicks, this totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, and so I'm like, ah, like I phoned my mom and she was like, why don't you just like phone 811 and see what they say? I'm like, okay. Because the hospital in town told me, do not come here. We cannot do anything with
Oh.
you.
Right
Like,
straight to the city, we beg you.
yes. Like I went in because I wasn't feeling good the one day and they were like, please don't come back. And I was like, but I don't want to drive an hour to the city. And so mom's like, just phone 811. And I phone and she was like, I'm explaining I'm explaining that my non-stress test might have shown some stuff, but and she goes, "Ma'am, I'm gonna have to get you to hang up and dial 911." And I was like, what?
What?
And I'm like, this sounds like a little bit extra. Like, and I phoned my mom back and I'm like, I am not phoning 911. This is stupid. Like, and she was like, please just go over to your in law's house and see what they're doing and just go get checked out. Like,
Yes. At the
I
very
was
least, please.
yes. And so Logan is working in the city, but he has a company vehicle. So I go over to my in laws. I'm like, what are you guys up to tonight? They're like, nothing. And I was like, can you drive me to meet Logan? And they're like looking at me like I'm crazy. And I was like, I think I could be in labor, but probably not. I was like,
Just want to preface it by saying.
yeah. I was like, I doubt it. We're going to get sent home, but they say I have to go in. And so we end up going into the city and like, me and Logan chatted the whole way in, and I was like, this is silly. Like, let's just go back home. I feel fine. And we get to the city, and they're scanning you in, and the Royal Alex deals with everything, like,
Mhm.
literally everything. And so I'm in, like, the labor and delivery, like, check-in room, and she was just like, okay, how far apart are your contractions? I was like, maybe like 12 to 15 minutes. And they're like 5-ish minutes long. Like, I was like, they're not very strong. And she was like, yeah, we usually tell you guys not to come in unless they're 5 minutes apart. And I was like, I know that. Like, I didn't want to come in, but 811 said I had to be there. And she like pulls up my chart and she's like, alrighty, just starts checking me in and like, and they have you all written on the board, and everyone has like a purple magnet or a green magnet or a blue magnet, and mine is red. And I'm like reading the chart, and it's just like high risk. Like, and
Oh my
so
gosh.
yeah, I was like, oh, and they check me, and they're like, you're 1 centimeter dilated. Like, I was like, oh, I'm probably going home then. And then they checked me an hour later. They're like, yeah, you're 4 centimeters dilated. I was like, oh my gosh, like. So yeah, I went into labor like completely spontaneous on my own, but just like in absolute disbelief. And so yeah, they checked me in. Everything was like going well. I had an amazing nurse and she was like advocating for me. She was like, if you don't want checked, don't get checked because every time they check you, obviously, like risk of infection. And
Yep.
she really just like advocated for my safety and the baby safety. And I was like, this is amazing. But because it was twins, they could not get heartbeats on your little like Dopplers. So for like for her whole shift, because we got there at like 7, she stood at my belly holding them, moving them. I think I had like 4 different times the ultrasound tech came in to find heart rate.
Which is so stressful because you knew you had cord pinching, right?
Yes, and like,
Oh.
and they were like, this is baby B. I was like, that's not baby B, this is baby A. Like, it was very stressful. And finally, the nurse was just like, would you be open to us breaking your water to put a lead on baby A's head so we don't have to keep? And I was like, yes, like that is okay with me. And they had broke her water, and so far both babies were head down. Like, I was pretty much like good to go for like a vaginal delivery, which is kind of
Mhm.
what I wanted to do. And I had had my epidural, and it took about 45 minutes to place. I um they tried 5 times.
Oh my gosh, Robyn.
In one of those times, they did what they call a lumbar puncture. So they tapped into like my spinal fluid, and it sends an imbalance, and one of the side effects of that is like extreme migraine. And they're like, yeah, it could last up to 2 weeks if you get it. I got it like an hour later.
Oh no. That just gave me
So
full body chills. Ugh.
yeah, I was like, oh, like I have bad luck, but like I usually don't get the symptoms. And as soon as it hit, I was like, I couldn't even like see straight. I couldn't lift my neck. Like it hurt. Like just my body had hurt so badly. And I was like, okay, this is not cool. And then my epidural started working, or stopped working, sorry. My contractions are like 2 minutes apart, 30 seconds long. I have like this headache, and then baby B flipped. And they were like, we strongly recommend an epidural if you're going to deliver twins, and one is breech, or else they have to go in, flip the baby.
Oh my
And they were like,
gosh.
you will feel it all. And at that point, I was just like, I couldn't get any relief from this headache. And I was like, can I just get a C-section? And they were like, absolutely. I think they were
They're like,
waiting
we're
for me.
begging you at this point.
Yeah, they were like, oh my gosh, yes, like let's get you in this like C-section. But
Yeah.
because my epidural wasn't working, I had to go under general, and Logan couldn't be in the room. So we both
Oh
missed the
my
birth of them.
gosh.
Yeah, just like it was like with Walker, we wanted to do it fully on our own, just the two of us, like spend that time so special. And
Mhm.
this time, Logan said it best, but said, like, I really wish someone was there to, like, just stay with me. Because he said he sat, like, outside that room for an hour, and he was like, I thought I was coming home with an empty vehicle. They're supposed to be bringing home two babies, and I thought you were dead. I thought they were dead. Like, just nobody gives you any information. And they had, like, forgot about him for a full hour. Just no updates. But they both came out 6 pounds, 3 ounces,
Oh,
both of them.
exactly.
Yeah,
Both. Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
They both went up, like, straight to the NICU.
Yeah.
Um, he got to go up once they found him and remembered to give him the information, which was so nice. And I got a little bit of relief from my headache from the anesthesia, like, which was
Yeah.
amazing. And I remember, like, them wheeling me back to the room, and they're like, they're already off their CPAP, like their breathing is amazing. And I was like, we're going home in 3 days. Like, this is awesome. Like, no way we're gonna like actually have a NICU stay. And then I didn't get to meet them for like 13 hours probably. Like, I was so sore from like my back, the 5 epidurals that they tried. I just like couldn't get out of bed. Like, and the
Understandably.
nurses the nurses were like, you need to get up. And I was like, I understand that. I am trying. Like, why do I feel like my insides are gonna fall out of my body? Like,
Yeah.
they were like, oh, okay. So I think it was like 3 in the morning. I got out of bed and I was like, Kate, grab the wheelchair, like, let's go. I need to go see these babies. Like, I had seen pictures, you can't see their faces. And so yeah, we go up, and everything, like, the nurses are like, they're doing awesome. There's hunting for their soothers, which is amazing that they would like take them. Now
Yeah.
I just like was like, this is great. Like, and then the next day, the nurse was like, are you gonna breastfeed? And I was like, yeah, I would like to. And she just like hands me this pump, and she was like, okay, get pumping. And I was like, I've never used a breast pump in my life. Like, I was like, okay. I was like, why can't I just like go upstairs and
Oh,
she was
this is
like,
on the postpartum unit.
yes. And I
Okay.
actually was in the antepartum unit
Oh, okay.
because
Yep.
I didn't have my babies with me. So instead of taking up a room in postpartum without babies, they just put me in the antepartum room.
Oh, interesting. They put
Yeah.
me in a postpartum room with another crying baby.
Oh,
So none of us were sleeping.
no. I guess that's maybe one way to bring in your milk, though.
That's true. I had like him on the monitor and I was watching it holding my phone.
Oh my
Just
gosh.
trying to stimulate everything right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I would have much rather have been in the antepartum unit.
Yeah. And like,
That's kind of nice.
it was actually because I didn't, like, it was quiet and they really
Mm.
didn't mind any visitors coming in and out. And I remember like Logan wheeling me up like the first time into the NICU, and you go across the pedway and you say your name, and we were in pod J. I think we were 18 and 19, like at the very back. And all of the parents that are up there at that time are just like, "Oh, hello," like, the kindest, like,
Mhm.
the nurses are like, "You're coming to see your babies for the first time." It was, like, the coolest experience in a terrible, like, it's very heartwarming because you're there and your babies are in this NICU, but they're, like, happy that you get to be there.
Yes.
And so they were essentially doing good, and all of my problems with baby B, Wilder, my boy, were gone. He was doing awesome, and they had flipped to Whitley, my little girl, and she just, like, wasn't on CPAP, but, like, would forget to breathe.
Mhm.
So, like, she would just they call them episodes. I'm sure you know all about the
Yeah, I
episodes.
can hear the dingers going off around
Yeah.
my head right now. Oh.
And so they were just more concerned about her. They gave her, like, the caffeine boost,
Yep.
but, um, they say that twins, um, are more likely to act more premature than they are, and they said they really don't know. They also say that girls thrive in the NICU and boys are lazy, which for me,
Okay.
it was actually switched. So they, like, couldn't believe how well Wilder was doing. Like, they were like, "Man, this little boy is like, he's taking in his fluids, he's really breathing, he wasn't having any episodes, but he had no idea how to eat." And
Mhm.
they and I remember the doctor saying, like, at that 34-week mark is when they learn how to suck, swallow, and breathe. And she pretty much told us that, um, essentially, I would have been better off to have them 2 weeks earlier, and they would maybe be able to figure out eating better
Oh,
than to have
interesting.
them right in that 34, 35-week mark, which I thought was strange. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, they just really couldn't figure out how to eat. And so I'm pumping, and I remember going up there, and they were like, "Do you want to try and breastfeed?" And I'm like, "But they have wires and
Mhm.
tubes and IVs everywhere. Like, how do you how do you do this?" And she was like, "Just like you like, do you have another child? Have you breastfed before?" And I was like, "Yep." Like, she was like, "Kate, well, let's just try it." And I just remember being like, I don't I don't know how a baby this small, like, with this many wires and tubes ever figures it out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's maybe why I never could successfully do it, but I couldn't they never latched. Like, they would just get so frustrated, and so I just kept pumping, and by, like, I think day 5, they had said that they were strong enough to move into the 5 west of the NICU. So we actually got to go stay with them, which was great. And I had a lactation consultant come in, I think, like, every day, like, almost, and be like, "Okay, like, let's try breastfeeding." And I'm like, "Yep." Like, I had nipple shields, I had everything, and these babies would not latch. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't get them to take, like, a pull. It wouldn't matter if they were, like, kind of hungry, starving, or, like, asleep. They would just, like, instantly fall asleep from skin to skin, I think.
Mhm. They get so comfy, right? And
Yes.
warm, and Case
Yeah,
always did that too. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm just like, "Should I strip them down, like, make them a little bit uncomfortable?" And they were like, "No, because they're preemies and they don't want
Mhm.
them." And so, like, I felt so discouraged, and so for me, I was and the lactation consultant also said this, but she was like, "You know what? Like, they're not necessarily counting the intake that they get from you as their amount drank during the day because they have to reach a certain amount that they drink from a bottle opposed to tube feeding to go home." And so I was just like, "I'll just power through. We'll just bottle feed and, like, get ourselves out of here." And so it was like I was, like, devastated in a sense. Like, all I wanted to do was breastfeed. I remember telling people that were like, "Oh, well, like, you're gonna formula feed, it's twins." And I was like, "I don't want to." to be honest, I didn't know really anything about formula feeding a newborn. It sounded like a lot of work to wash a lot of bottles. Like,
Mhm.
I I didn't even know anything about breast pumps. The only breast pump that I had ever used was a manual breast pump before. And so I was like, this all sounds like a lot of work to not have them breastfeed. And it's not that I was against formula. I just like had no knowledge on it. And so I was just, I don't want to, like, this is not what I want. And I think that's like where like my detachment came from the twins. Like, I think that I had such a hard time bonding with them because I couldn't breastfeed and I
Yeah.
was so angry about it. And I was attached to a wall pump. I couldn't move. I had to hold them onto my chest. You have to pump every 2 to 3 hours. Like, I just essentially like felt like I was trapped and stuck to a wall. And like when you're in the NICU, there's there's not a lot of places to go, but I felt like I couldn't get out because I had to
Yeah.
just come back to the room.
Yeah, I remember having timers on my phone and alarms, and it would be like,
Mhm,
"Pump," and then I put a little cute bottle emoji to kind of make myself happy, but among a lot of things that you and I connected with when I was in the NICU, one of the things that really stands out for me was, the struggle in the feeding and you supporting me through that and
mhm,
describing pretty much essentially what you just described to me via text in that time. And I love that for you, the lactation consultant came in quite often to see you. I had asked a few times, and I am naturally an oversupplier. And
mhm.
so my supply was never the issue. It was
Yeah.
again the preemie of trying to do the suck, breathe, swallow thing,
Mhm.
latch enough to like transfer the milk, that kind of thing. And so the few times, and it's funny that you say with the cords and everything, because I remember I think it was day 2 that he was born or something, was the first and only time that the lactation consultant came in. She's like, "You're wanting to breastfeed?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Okay, put him on." Just flips this 28 weeker and puts him on the boob. And I was like, "Sorry?" I'm like, "This is weird." And it was almost comical because it's like the boob was like 5 times the size of it. He's just wrestling it. And I'm like, "Okay, boy, calm down." But
Yeah.
yeah, like did not feel supported in the feeding. And I'm like, yeah, I know supply is not my issue. It's I
Yeah.
so desperately want to go home. And I did get to such a desperate state. And he kept pulling out his own NG tube. And like we were
Mhm.
getting to the point of him needing it out anyway. But the one time I think we were going to take it out the next day and he had pulled it out. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just press pause. I don't want it in right now. Let's just try and bottle or breast. At this point, I don't care. I'll figure it out when I get home.
Yeah.
Which I mean, sometimes I'm happy I did. Sometimes I wish I would have done it different. But giving him that bottle and then he would just fall asleep. And I was
Yes.
so panicked and so anxious because I'm like, him not eating cannot be the reason I don't go home.
Yeah.
And
Like,
I,
you've been through so much, like,
yeah.
a simple bottle is the reason that we're not going home.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm like,
and I
eventually
couldn't
he'll get
believe
so
that.
hungry that he'll eat, right?
Yes.
And so
That's what my mind would think, like,
yeah. And I'm like, "Come on, buddy, like, we gotta go, like, this cannot be the reason," and I was so anxious and overwhelmed about
mhm.
it. I think it was at, like, 3 or 4 in the morning one night, and it was, like, when I first started to stay with him in Five West, and, of course, you're
Yes.
getting used to all the alarms and his noises, and I was up every
Mhm.
time he made a noise or every time the alarm would beep,
Yeah.
even if it would be like, "Oh, it's just not picking up properly," because I was so scared something was gonna happen
Mhm.
to him,
Yeah.
and so I'm so tired and I was just like I went out into the hallway, I'm like, "Can you please just put the NG tube in?" I'm like, "Just top him up." I'm like, "I don't know how much you took." I was so stressed, and then they do the thing where you put the timer on, you watch the clock, and minutes pass that he's on this breast. I'm like, "Well, did he suckle the whole time?" I'm like, "I think so." I'm like, "I don't know." He's doing his thing on there, and it
Yeah.
like, the feeding was so overwhelming, and I had a full-term baby for my first that just she loved the boob from the moment
Yeah.
she came out of that C-section.
Yeah.
And so that's what I knew. And same thing, I very rarely I pumped enough to get a stash with her,
Mhm.
and that was it. I really never seen a pump again. And to be attached to that pump, and it is kind of a forced thing because
Yeah.
they are physically not big enough, and you need your milk to come in, and you're sitting there staring at your baby, and I just felt like a mechanical, like, I felt like a cow, honestly, a dairy
Yes.
cow.
That's exactly how I felt.
Yeah,
And I also just, like, I felt like my boobs were then used to the pump pulling the milk.
yeah,
The babies weren't the same motion as the pump. So
mhm,
even when they were sucking, I was like, I don't know if anything's coming out right now because it's not the same stimulation as the pump.
yeah.
And like I exclusively pumped for like 4.5 months. Like I never had supply issues. I just like still to this day, like it's almost time to pump and I'm like, "Oh." But I refuse I refuse to buy formula for twins. Like they get a formula bottle in the morning and everything else is like breast milk. But
That is amazing. I just need to stop you and say that. Like, I very, very seldom come across a twin mom that is breastfeeding, whether or not it's pumping or latching them. Like, that's amazing.
yeah, it's like I am like very proud of myself to be able to feed them,
Mhm.
but pumping is the it was so foreign to me before this. Like and they were like, "Oh, you maybe need to like get this one or this kind." And I was like, "I can't just go to the store." Like I was so confused. And I
Mhm.
remember Logan being like, we were like 4 days postpartum. We were staying in the border rooms. Like we weren't
Oh
with the
god.
twins. That is the scariest place that I've ever slept.
We ended up giving them some black and white feedback on there, and charge nurse ended up, like, coming into my room one day. She goes, "I just need to thank you for saying something. We got a grant to fix them up." I'm like, "Yeah, they're disgusting." There was pubic hair in the shower. That was not mine. Okay.
Uh-huh.
We need to halt. Like something needs to be done, and maybe a fan or something because I don't want to breathe air from the 1990s. Like that's what it felt like I was doing.
I felt like Jeffrey Dahmer was
Yeah,
sleeping next to me, in the room next to me.
that's so true.
Oh,
Mm.
I'm so glad that you felt the same way because
Oh
Logan is
yeah.
a little bit picky on like where we stay. He went over there first with the social worker. She took him over and
Yep.
he came back. He texted me and he goes, "I don't think you're gonna like this." And I'm not picky. And I was like, "Grow up. Like it's a free place to stay. We are fine." And this is the first time that I'm leaving the postpartum or the NICU and going through the hospital. And I'm like, this place is scary.
Felt
And
like an
it's like
insane asylum.
and the empty hallways that you have to
Mhm.
cross through, the homeless people, the people on drugs that are hiding throughout that hospital, the
Mhm.
elevators that stink like pee.
Mm.
Like and it's like 10:30 p.m. because we're just leaving the like the NICU to
Mhm.
go to this room. And I'm like, "I don't like this." And he's like, "Then you're not gonna like where we're staying." And I'm like, "It can't be that bad." And we open the door and I just like tears. I was like, "What is this place?" And we go to the bed. There is no sheets.
Nope.
There is like a non-fitted sheet on top and that is it.
Mhm.
It's a plastic mattress.
Yeah.
And I was
It
like,
felt like I was literally just sleeping on the floor.
"Yeah,
Like, and when we're going through what we're going through, the least I would like to do is sleep on a soft mattress because I'm
yes."
sleeping by myself without my baby.
And you're, like, post C-section, I was like,
Oh
"
god,
they
yeah.
want me to sleep on this, I can't even, like, get myself out of the wheelchair."
Mhm.
Logan slept with his shoes on, his jeans on, his hood up, like, he was like, I'm scared of bed bugs," and they're like, "It's not a real bed," like,
Mhm.
it
I know, I
was
felt so bad, like, complaining because I'm so
uh-huh,
grateful for the free place, but this is not okay.
yeah. Logan said, "If we ever win the lottery, we're building a hotel for NICU parents because that's not it, like, that's not
Bless.
where you stay."
That's so true.
Yeah.
I wanna circle back to you, and I was telling a girlfriend this morning because I was supposed to go to the city today for this event thing, And the closer I get, the more anxious I get. And it would have meant me being away from Case for 12 hours,
Yeah.
which would mean pumping. And I was so anxious and physically could not get myself to go. And I think that's because for so long, I was forced to leave my baby. I was forced to pump. That's the
Yeah.
only way he could get milk. And it just feels so wrong to me. I'm like, absolutely not. He should just be on the boob. And my husband took him into the city today, like just Lloyd, 30 minutes away for a little outing. And even just the thought of him going for a few hours, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even put you in your car seat, and I miss you, sorry, so much. And I'm just like staring at my pump on the counter. I'm like, how long can I go? But it's such a
Think it's a
mind thing for me
game.
now.
Mhm.
Like it's
And it,
almost a little bit of PTSD.
it is. It
Like it feels
honestly,
crippling.
the first, I think, was the first month we were home, I only had a wall pump. And I'm like trying to figure out timing because I was pumping a half hour at a time. That is a half hour that I have to sit down. I cannot hold any of my kids. I
Mhm.
cannot get up to get snacks. I can't get a bottle. I was just like, I don't know. Like, I had just the most anxiety around pumping for that first month. And finally, I ordered some like portable pumps.
Mhm.
And Logan had left when the twins were a month and a half old. He had to leave for work training for a month. And the first, I made it one day and I packed everyone up and I went to my mom's. And my pumps were sitting at my sister's. And the first day that I used them was at my sister's house. And I was like, you mean to tell me I'm in Home Depot and I can pump? Like,
Mhm. The freedom they offer. And those, maybe
yeah.
they were a thing 5 years ago when I had my oldest, and I didn't know about them, but I had like, yeah, the Medela, you have to plug it into the wall. And I remember
Hmm.
sitting there holding them.
Yes.
Just like,
No
F
shirt on,
this.
holding them. Like, nobody
Yep.
walk into my house because you're
Like
going to
for
get a show.
yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I just pumping serves a time and a place, but it really changed for me in the NICU. The
Yeah.
whole concept of it.
I was just so confused by like, what do you mean pump? Like, can't I just go upstairs? But then because I was pumping, I was like, well, they're not gonna like, they just need it from this tube. Like, they just need to
Mhm.
eat from a tube. So I couldn't wrap my head around, like, I could not connect actually pumping to feeding my baby. I struggled so much with the bond, I think. I think a little bit from pumping, obviously from sleeping away from them not like not holding them all the time.
Yeah.
And like you just they don't want to eat. And a lot of our nurses actually, specifically in 5 West, like some of our younger nurses, they're like amazing, but they never like pushed them necessarily to eat, which like and that's kind of the rules, right? Like if they're not up when they're on semi-demand, like at that 3.5 hour mark, they have to be tube fed because you're like not supposed to wake them. They're preemies. They're supposed to be inside of you still. Like,
Yeah.
and so we just like we assumed like okay, they ate 10 mils from their bottle, the rest tube fed, and we like finally got a nurse, and her name was Gloria, and she was a little bit of an older nurse, and actually super funny because I had this friend, Vinny. He had twins previously before me, and he had, I had messaged him and I was like, were you in the NICU? And he was like, yeah, the girls were kind of giving me the lowdown. He was like, yeah, we were in 5 West. Had this nurse, Gloria. I hated her. We got into it in the hallway, like,
Oh
and
my
I was like,
goodness.
oh my gosh. So I messaged him. I was like, Gloria's our nurse. I'm so nervous. Like, and she was the best thing to happen.
Oh.
It was like I could see she was like a strict nurse, and she was like, you know what, these babies, they're up to their birth weight again. Their gestation, they were at 36 weeks or something. She was like, let's get you home. Like, what are we doing here? And I was like, what do you mean? Let's like, she was like, no, those babies stop eating. We're undressing them. We're doing a diaper change. We're waking them up. Like, let's get this rolling.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. Like, and Logan got home from work, which he was working in the city. So it was kind of nice. We got a twin room in 5 West so we could both sleep in the room with the babies. And he was like, oh, like we're really like they're eating. And I was like, yep. So she really helped us like fast track our NICU stay from probably like it could have been close to a month if we weren't like if she didn't come into our room, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
which like just so grateful that she was able to like push them and push us into feeding because we had no idea we could do that. I didn't know how to advocate for myself or for them.
And it's hard because it's new for everybody and everybody's so different. And I think in
Hmm.
some ways they can get very caught up in the textbook numbers and stuff that they're taught, and they're taught these protocols. And I remember the
Yes.
charge nurse saying to me, because I got very discouraged, Case had really bad reflux. And so he was throwing up so much. And it just like broke my heart. And then I got defeated because obviously he was tube fed for so long, being very early.
Yeah.
And so he would be so tired and wouldn't really want to latch and would just fall asleep. And I, yeah, got very discouraged. And then, so that was like, whatever, they're 2 3 hour feedings. I forget what it is. And then they go to semi demand and then demand.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he just seems to be starving 1 hour later and willing to eat, but then he's already had his feed. And it was almost a week. Every single nurse that I had, every time we did rounds, I was asking. And again, that advocation is so hard. And especially when you say your piece several times over, and it just takes
Yeah.
out one person. And I can't remember what her name was, but it was my first time having her. And I ended up bringing it up again. And she was like, okay, well, on rounds, we'll talk to the neonatologist and dietitian and whatnot, and we'll see if we can get him changed to semi demand. And we did, and he was a completely different baby after because he gains that extra hour. And on that hour, every time he'd be
Yeah.
willing to eat. I'm like, we couldn't have done this a week ago.
That's actually like amazing. Like
Yeah. But again, it
one
just takes that one person to
the
walk in your
one
room.
person to listen to you.
Yeah, like, "Let's get this shit done." Like,
Mhm.
we need to go home.
Yeah, you need to like and she was like, "Okay, like let's get these babies eating." And we had decided that that day we were going to go home and spend the afternoon with Walker. I was just like going through it. Like I hated being away from him and we woke up and I was like, "Look, let's just it was a Sunday. Let's go home for the evening and we'll come back tonight." And it ended up just being so late. We called and we decided that we were going to stay at home. And I asked to talk to our nurse to let her know. And Gloria's in her room. I'm watching the Oilers game and I'm holding your little girl and she is chugging this bottle. And I was like, what? Like, she was like, yeah, she's
Aw.
doing awesome. Like, and that just like I was like, we might actually get to go home soon. And she was our night nurse, so obviously she wasn't there at rounds because they only round in the morning and do the vitals and everything. But she said, you tell your nurse and in rounds that you are ready to go home and push to go home.
Mhm.
And they had just hit demand. Like they had just pulled their feeding tubes like the next day. And she was like, when they pull them, like give yourself a day. And I remember like the doctor coming in, she's reading their charts and she's like, we're probably gonna put their feeding tubes back in. And I was like, why? I was like, they've been eating. And she was like, slowly reading. She was like, oh. She was like, I was convinced I was coming in here to put feeding tubes back in. And I was
What?
like, yeah, like she was like, I thought that they were both gonna go backwards and they ended up not. And they were like finishing most of their bottles, like, and I was just like, "Okay, so can we go home?" And she was like, "Okay, no, not after one night." But, I think it was, like, 2 days later, and
Mhm.
she was like, And Wilder had been snacking a little bit, but he was on demand. He was allowed to eat really whenever he wanted.
Yeah.
And she was like, "We could keep you here and, like, fix that snacking." And I was like, "Nope. I wanna
I'll
go
work on the
home."
snacking at home.
Yeah. I was like, This isn't my first rodeo. Like, we'll figure it out." And I just remember, like, thinking, like, this NICU is, like, the enemy. I don't wanna be here. And now I look back and I think I could walk in there, like, comfortably and, like, just walk up to my room and be like, "This is where I lived for a little while." Like, it's the strangest feeling, just
Mhm.
being told, like, "Go home, leave your baby." And, like, a lot of parents that live in the city, they don't even stay at the hospital, or if you
Yeah.
stay in a Ronald McDonald House, like, you're still not at the hospital,
Mhm.
and some parents never make 5 West, like, they just get dismissed right from in the NICU, and so I just I was like, "What do you mean? Like, I can sleep next to my baby, so I'm not allowed to leave them."
Yeah, I felt like I had to, and I very much advocated for 5 West. I think I asked every single day. And the charge nurse kept saying, "Oh, are you sure? Like, it's gonna be quite a while till you go home, quite a while." I'm like, "Define quite a while," because
Yeah.
the other nurse just told me that maybe within the next week or so, and I think it ended up being 8 or 9 days later, maybe not even. I lose track of time in that place, but
Yes.
so often I would sit there when we were still in the NICU pods and be like, "Are we ever going to go home?" Because all the
Mhm.
babies around us, and granted, some of them were probably being transferred, but when they would come in with the car seats and everything, I would just like sit there and be like, "Oh, okay." And
Yeah.
then we went to 5 West, and yeah, once we got transferred, and I even had, like, comedy show tickets for that night that we got transferred, and I'm like, "I can't go to the comedy show now, like, I feel so bad, they told me if I was gonna be there, I need to be there," and I told my nurse, "Okay,
Yeah.
I'll be back by 10 PM." And she's like, "It's fine, like, go enjoy yourself."
You feel
I
like
was
you're a teenager again, like, you're like, "I
Yes.
have to tell you every little thing that
Yep.
we're doing," like.
Even if I went for supper, I'd be, "Okay, I'm gonna be back in 15 minutes." So, like, "You can take an hour if you want, longer."
Yeah.
I like checking in, making sure I'm here and there, and then, yeah, the one night the show ended up going a little later, so I call and I'm like, "Okay, it's like I'm almost late for curfew."
Yes.
If you could give I'm gonna ask for 2 pieces of advice. We're gonna start first with a mom who is expecting twins. What would be your biggest piece of advice for them?
I think, like, obviously, you have to mentally prepare yourself for any baby coming into the world, but, like, I think that you can't have expectations.
Mhm.
There won't be expectations. You might be told that you're gonna make term 36, 37, 38 weeks. You have to expect the unexpected because I never thought that I would go into labor. Like, I thought that those were stories that just happened, but it would never happen to me. And I think you really have to, like, expect the unexpected with your delivery. Like, whether you want a vaginal delivery or a C-section, you need to be open to either or. Um, your plans are going to change. And I know that that happens with every single birth story. It's just so hard to have expectations with twins.
Yeah.
And I even feeding, like, you just need to be more open to things, like, more open to the NICU and maybe, like, reaching out to NICU parents and just, like, you gotta have support. Like, I think that to think that you can do twins, like, you need to be open to people coming in and helping you. It's it's really like you need your tribe, and you can't, uh I was very much like, "I'm gonna do this by myself. We are gonna have a textbook delivery. I'll come home. I'll figure this out." And really, nothing went as planned. So I would just say, like, don't turn away your help and just, like, give yourself grace. Like, it's okay to cry when the babies cry.
Mhm.
Like, and I know that a lot of that can go for even just a first time mom or like a singleton, but I think that I didn't give myself any grace when I had the babies. I didn't think about it. And I wish that I would have realized how much harder it was going to be just because I was in denial. I think, like, joining twin groups, like, there's a lot on Facebook. A lot of them have really, like, helped me navigate feeding. I couldn't figure out how to feed them at home by myself. There's a thing called this Twin Z pillow. It holds both babies, and um, they lived in it. Like,
I
it
love
I would
that.
I rotated them through the pillow. They slept in it a lot. Like, I couldn't figure out how to soothe them. So a lot of the time one was in the pillow, I was holding one. I had to learn how to, like, safely bottle prop because when they're hungry at the same time, it's impossible to feed both.
Mm.
So that was one thing that really saved me. Like, do your research into, like, the items that can help you with twins. Like, save your mental sanity. Like,
Do you have any recommendations of places where moms could find, like, was there any Pinterest lists of like twin momness, like must haves, or where, like, or did you just learn as you went?
so my auntie actually, my cousin had twins, and my auntie came to my baby shower and she was like, "I'm getting you this. I'm getting you this." And I was like, "Oh, like, what is that?" And she was like, "This is called a twin Z pillow, and, like, your twins are gonna live in it." And I was like, "That's weird." And she was right. And now that I had joined the twin mom groups, I would say join them before you give birth. I hadn't.
Okay.
And I think that, like, joining beforehand and just, like, realizing, like, asking the questions in those groups, like, what are things that you couldn't live without, that really helped me. Even if you don't have this twin Z pillow, a lot of moms recommended 2 boppy pillows, like, just something where your baby is safe, but, like, comfortable, like, they're not just laying on their back, like, it's
And
not
I
the
feel like
same
we've
as.
come so far too in, technology and stuff, and moms, probably a twin mom at some point came up with that, and like
Mhm.
we've come so far and these things exist. You
Yes.
think you need something and you're like, "Oh, that would never even be a thing," and then all of a sudden you start researching and turns out you can buy it everywhere and anywhere,
Yes. Like,
right? I'm
there is, like,
definitely gonna have to put that link to that pillow on your
yeah,
episode. That is
it
so
is
good.
it is a pretty penny, like, it's expensive, but I would say it's worth every dollar that
Mhm,
you can spend on it. And I remember, like, because I had connection issues with my twins, I didn't wanna hold them a lot, and I
mhm.
struggled to hold them because I was pumping. It's very uncomfortable to hold a baby while you're pumping, of a toddler crawling on me, and so, like, that pillow really saved me where I knew that they were snuggled, like, they can get cozy in it, like, it saved my sanity, I would say, like, that pillow, a while that a pillow did that, but it really helped, like,
It's those
hands
little
down.
things though, right, that you have
Yeah.
to find as you go through your journey, and it's, yeah, funny that you say, "Oh, a pillow saved me." It's like,
Yeah.
well, cup of coffee saves some moms too, you know? So, like, it doesn't have to be something big.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
anything else that is, like, burning on your heart that you wanna share?
I think just, like, um I think ignorance is bliss when you are pregnant and you don't have to go to the NICU and you get your perfect birth story, like, how magical that is, that you don't have to experience, like, the trauma of the NICU the and not even the trauma of the NICU, because it was a I had to stop, and, like, I was throwing myself a pity party. And I was like, "How lucky are we to be in the NICU?"
Mhm.
Because some moms don't get that.
Yep.
And I think that was, like, one thing that, like, I thought that the NICU was the enemy, and it wasn't. It was a saving grace.
It very much feels like the enemy in the moment, though.
Yeah,
I can totally
yeah,
relate to that.
yeah,
And I think too, and I'm pretty sure I said this in every little chat that I've had, is like also giving yourself grace to feel those sad moments, right?
yeah,
And the toxic positivity is
yes.
so easy to fall into and
Mhm,
compare yourself and be like, well, I shouldn't be sad because, and it's like, no, be sad because
yes.
you didn't get that magical birth story. And,
Mhm,
especially, like, I totally feel for you, and you said you had to go 13 hours before you met them, and, um, when you were there, did they have, like, the little baby cameras on, like, so you could
Thank
watch them
God.
on their phone? Yeah. I
Yes.
did that. I think I delivered at 1:04 AM, and I think it was the next day around lunchtime, I got my own self out of bed. My nurse kept telling me, like, "No, like, you gotta wait, you gotta wait." Like, "No, I'm sick and tired of
Yeah.
watching my baby on this camera," or my husband had full freedom to go up there and he would
Mhm.
FaceTime me. I'm like, "This is not okay." And I
Yeah.
understand things happen and whatnot, but even like, I was very sick after my C-section this time,
Yeah.
and so I just was, like, laying in bed, and of course, if you've had a C-section, you know what coughing is like and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I'm
Yeah.
vomiting, which is more aggressive than coughing in my, like,
Oh my
comparisons of doing the
gosh.
2, and so I'm
Yeah.
laying there, and I'm so sick and so tired and just, like, the high of everything, and my husband was like, "Well, I'm just gonna go say goodnight to our son." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like, tell him his mom loves him, I guess, I don't know, and I just felt
Yeah.
so helpless. And, like, I get it, they needed me to rest, and I wasn't like, I was sick and whatever, but as for the next day and, like, they're busy up there and whatnot, but I'm like, I need my baby. And,
Mhm.
like, to be in a room next to someone else who has their baby, I'm
It's
like,
like, it's
"Ah."
heartbreaking to know that
Yeah.
your baby is somewhere and you just, like, can't get to them, and I remember,
Mhm.
like, Logan running my milk up, and I'm like, "Yeah, you just go take that up there, and I'll just be here by myself."
Yeah.
And, like, well, and I had that lumbar puncture.
Oh
Well,
gosh, yes.
my headache did come back the next day. I couldn't, the only thing that would help was laying flat, completely flat. I ended up having to get, an epidural blood patch. So another epidural,
Oh my gosh.
they take your blood out of your arm and they inject it into that spot in hoping it'll clot the hole. So, yeah, like I got that 2 days post-op. Having a C-section, you have to do it in the same position that you get an epidural in. I couldn't lift my head, I couldn't see. I could feel blood, like, running down my back, like,
Mm,
and Logan is just, like, free to go do whatever, and I'm like, "I can't even get myself out of bed, even if I wanted to, I couldn't
mhm.
get up." And I just remember, "Why me? Like, why is this happening?"
Yeah.
And even though I had 2 relatively healthy babies, like, I was still devastated. And I know that, like, they were healthy and my story ends, like, in a very happy ending, like, I have all of my babies at home, but, like, the birth trauma is wild. Everything that I thought was going to be my birth story wasn't, and I didn't think that I was gonna have a C-section. I had a C-section. I wasn't even awake for it. Like,
And I
I
think that comes with its own trauma too. Like,
yeah,
my therapist runs an Instagram page, and she often talks about that, and it's
uh,
like, that was one of my I've never been put under for any sort of procedure, and then my heart just goes out to the moms that, even with an emergency C-section or something, when you're
yeah,
awake, it's like you get to experience that cry and all of these things, and then to be put under, have to come out of that to begin with. You're groggy,
mhm,
all of the things that come with that.
yeah,
And then, you wake up to hear how it all went.
yeah,
It's
like,
like
and
you
I didn't know where I was when I woke up, and then I coughed, and I was like, "Oh, I know exactly what just happened. I just, like, got cut open," but I'm,
yeah,
like, looking around, I don't recognize anything, and I kind of see Logan, he's, like, gowned up, and I'm like, are they alive? Like,
yeah,
nobody had told you anything, right?" And he was like, "Yep, they're healthy." He's not even sure what they look like. Like, nobody knows. He's trying to show me pictures, and I'm like, "I see a couple blankets and some tube." Like, I really think that that alone affected my bond. Not meeting them for 13 hours affected it, not breastfeeding, not being beside them. There was all, like, these factors, and for me, there wasn't anything to be like, I wanna stay here. I remember my sister taking me and Logan out for lunch, and we we went to Sherwood Park. Logan was like, I can't be in the city right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, get me away from this hospital. Like, I want to go home. Where Logan was like, I feel very nervous leaving our babies. And I was like, no, they're fine. I don't want to be here. I'm so detached, unemotional.
Mhm.
Like, it
But
took
just something
probably,
else to process for you too, right?
yes. There was nothing attaching me to them because I felt like I missed it all.
Yeah. Did you find, like, the further you got into your pregnancies and these kind of complication and the high risks started to surface, did you disassociate from them a little bit then too because you were so anxious and, like, obviously scared that something was gonna happen to them? Or did you find that it really happened once they were born?
I think like it probably started when I was trying to protect myself in
Yeah.
case something had happened.
That holds a lot of power, is the protection
Yeah, I
part,
think
right?
that I was so worried, and I had known that A was a girl and B was a boy, and I just remember being like, "Well, how do I like, what if they make me choose? Like, what if something's happening and I have to choose a baby? Like, how do you do that?" And that was, like, a big thing, and I just started to, like, dissociate because I didn't know, like, and I know that my complications weren't as serious as some people have, but there's just, like, so much that crosses your mind when they're telling you, like, "I don't know if your babies will make term. I think that you might be a NICU mom." Even being told that, I was like, "It's not happening." My mother-in-law kept trying to prepare me. She was, like, such an advocate, like, you might have babies that are early and you'll have to be in the NICU and you
Mhm.
won't be able to come home until their due date. And I was like, no, that's that won't be me. That's other people. It won't be me. And it was me. And so like I think, yeah, like I detached from them, I would say like really close to the end of my pregnancy and then just missing everything altogether. I was just like, I don't know, like, is this how it's supposed to be? I just remember such a strong bond with my firstborn and like bonding so instantly and then not having a bond at all. Foreign.
Very that's exactly the word I that just popped into my head. It's so foreign. Um, so you said they're 10 months old now. Do you feel more connected nowadays, or is it still a struggle?
I think I struggled like very much for the first 4 to 5 months. I felt like being a mom to them was a chore. And
Mhm.
I, my daughter screamed for the first 3 months of her life.
Oh,
And
no.
so I remember being like, why? Like, there was so much pity for myself, like, why me? I remember a friend telling me she was having twins, and I wanted to tell her, "Don't do it." Like, abort mission because you can't do it, nobody can be a twin mom, like,
It's not fun.
like, she was like, "Do you have any advice?" And I was like, "Not
Do
any good."
I?
Yeah, like, I was like, "I got no good words."
You want positive or negative, and then I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
When they hit 6 months, I think I don't know what changed, but I have, like, the strongest bond with them now. They're so fun, and now once they hit, like, that 8, 9-month mark, they're actually interacting with each other, and, like, they giggle at each other while they're pulls Whitley's hair. Like,
Of course.
yes, it's and, like, seeing Walker with them, and he loves them to death. He has always been, like, the best big brother, which I didn't think was gonna happen, and I never wanted to force the babies on him. I wanted him to come to terms with them on his own because I also didn't have that bond, and I remember telling everyone, "Don't force them on him. He will go to them."
Yeah.
And he just loved them. Like, and I think that maybe helped me a little bit was seeing him love them, and I was like, "Well, if he can love them, I can do this too." But, yeah, that first 6 months, I didn't know if I would make it out of those first 6 months, honestly, and now I love all of it, and I'm amazed every time they hit a new month. I can't believe I made 10 months. And I know that I like say that every month, but I'm so surprised.
Yeah, every month counts, right? And it's
Like,
so true. There's so many moments I think we sit and we're like, is this ever gonna end or does this get easier? And it can
mhm,
feel like you're drowning. And I think
yeah,
it's so important to normalize that because so often we see, well, obviously socials are a big thing, and there's so many quotes about how wonderful motherhood is and this and that, and people are only really showing the good side. And you're like, well, if she can make it look so easy, why do I feel like I'm literally drowning?
and I
And
think that was, like, a big thing for me was, like, I had seen, like, other twin moms and they're like, "Oh, come with me for, like, a nighttime routine," and I was like, "You have a routine?"
yeah,
Like,
what's that word?
yeah, I was and, like, it would just make me mad. I'm like, "It's not that easy."
Mhm.
Or, like, someone would give me advice, I'm like, "Easy for you to say." Like, I was angry at all the advice because a lot of it came from people with not in my situation, and I was
Yeah.
like, "You" it would frustrate me. I'm like, "You actually have no idea what I'm going through." And there was, like, a lot of the times where I was staying at my parents' house for that month, and my mom would be like, "Robyn, hold them." And I'm like, "No, like, I can't. Like, I
Mhm.
want to go outside. I don't wanna sit on the couch." I would just get so frustrated, and I the dissociation from them was so hard, and the screaming was so difficult, like and then I felt so bad for Wilder because I felt like all the attention was towards Whitley because she was so, colicky, and that's another thing was like, "Well, does she have reflux? Does she have gas?" I'm like, "I don't know, like, maybe, but, she doesn't throw up, she, like, burps a little bit." It's really just, like, more of a witching hour for her where she screams for 5 hours and she's okay during the day.
Little stinker.
Yeah. Where with you in case you're like, he has really bad reflux, you kind of have that, like, diagnosis of on what's going
Mm.
on. I was like, I can't even get myself to the doctor to ask what's wrong with her because I don't know how to pack up 3 kids, like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to go out, so this is gonna be what it's gonna be for now. She's not dying, I know that, like, she's gaining weight, I know that. I just like, that's what it was, and I was like, "Please don't give me advice. I'm just bitching. I sorry for my language." But,
Oh god. Let it
um,
out.
I was just like, "I'm just ranting because I'm so mad." I was like, "I
Yeah.
promise I don't want your advice. It's not helping me right now, like, because you have no idea what I'm going through.
Yeah,
Please
and
don't give it."
sometimes it's easier just to be like, "Please don't," instead
Yeah.
of just sitting there and trying to listen to it when you already have so much going on in your head.
Mhm.
And even with Case's reflux, in the NICU, he would be laying in his bed and it would just come out of him. It would hit the side of his little incubator and
Yeah.
his I called it his big boy bed.
Yeah.
And there was times I would go in there and it would be up in his CPAP tubing. I'm like, "Why are we not doing anything about this?" And so then at one point he was almost on continuous feeds because of
Yeah.
that. And then when we got home and he was still doing it, it took me a long time to have any doctor take me seriously. So baby spit up. I'm like, I understand that, but do all babies when I'm feeding them in the rocking chair, does the vomit hit the wall behind them? Probably not. Or it
No.
literally we were in West Ed one day, he had me covered down to my toes, it came out of him like a fire hydrant. It was
Yeah.
insane, and he would be, like, gurgling when he was trying to sleep, and
Ugh,
I'm like, "I can't
poor
sleep.
guy.
I'm not
No.
sleeping. This is so heartbreaking." And finally, when I went to get him checked for his lip and tongue tie is
Yeah.
when the LC took me seriously. She's a GP with LC,
Yeah.
certifications. And she was like, it could have a lot to do with the fact that he's super immature. And so his sphincter and
Yeah.
everything are just like not working appropriately, oversupply, the tongue and lip tie. Like there was so many things. And once she finally took us seriously, it's like we were able to slowly help him with that. Whereas before they're like, "Oh, it'll just stop." I'm like, "That's not okay with me because I literally can't do it anymore." And I know that there's so many other things that we could have been dealing with, with him being so early, but I'm like, that is our biggest issue. And
And that's not normal. And
no,
I hate when they're like, "Well, it is what it is." And I'm like, "But it shouldn't be like that. There
no.
has to be something that you can do to help." Like,
Yeah.
whenever I've gone into the hospital and they're like, "Is there, like, any complications with them?" And I was like, "They were just premature, like, born at 34 and 4." And I remember, like, I've had a couple nurses say this, "Well, that's not that early." And I'm like, "Early enough for the NICU,
Yeah.
like, early enough
And take
for
into
doctors to take it
yeah,
seriously." Like,
consider that they're twins and gestational diabetes early. Like, it's
yeah.
still early.
Yeah, I remember, like, just getting dismissed, like, for some of that stuff, or, like, um, just, like, nurses being like, "Oh, gestational diabetes, that doesn't make you high risk," and I was like,
Yes, it
"I'm
does.
not gonna tell you I'm not gonna tell you you're uneducated because you're a nurse and I'm not, but I don't think you know anything about this
Yeah.
subject."
You're
Like,
like, "I've lived it. I know
yeah,
what it can do and what it has done," right?
yeah,
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 it's
and I've been prepped by OBs about this that know all about gestational diabetes, like, they're specialty doctors, like,
mhm.
you're not a specialty doctor, like,
I know,
that was hard for me.
I feel like a couple of the NICU moms that I've met almost they could just be nurses or doctors. Like, they've been through so much and, like, listening to them talk about what their babies need and this and that. I'm like, "Holy cow." I'm like, You know it
Mhm.
all at this point."
Yeah, they're
Um,
putting in their baby's own NG tubes, and I'm like,
yep,
"You do what?" Like,
yep,
oh,
they're like, "They take this medicine, this medicine, this medicine for this procedure did this." I'm like, "Holy crow."
yeah,
That's, like it's so crazy what these little babies go through, but
yeah,
yeah, you add being premature on top of that, and it just adds a whole 'nother level of anxiety for us, and then, like, complications that they could be having may not be serious for a term baby, but, you
yes,
know, term is considered term for a reason,
yeah,
and it's like when the lungs are fully developed, when everything's supposed to be fully developed,
yeah,
and, like, early is early in my books.
yeah. I fully agree with that. I remember with my first, my mother-in-law would be like, "I just want the baby to get here, like, early." And then with, like, the twins, and she was like, "I know I want to meet them, but let's, like, keep them inside." Like, I think she, like, kind of understood, like, from she's a teacher, so she works with ladies, and she had realized, like, that, like, an early baby does mean NICU usually, and that was, like, a big thing for me, and a lot of people would be like, "But your babies are measuring ahead, so they'll be fine." And I was like, "Just because they're chunky babies doesn't mean that their lungs and their kidneys and their heart are developed
Yeah.
properly, like, just because 'cause they've got a little extra chunk doesn't mean much." Like,
Right? That doesn't affect the internal organs per se.
yeah. And that was, like, I think even my mom was just like, like, I couldn't believe, like, how long you had spent in the NICU, like, my nephew was born at 36 weeks, and they didn't spend any time in the NICU, like, well, they did, like, a little bit of breathing stuff, but she was in Lloyd, like, for a few
Mhm.
extra days, it wasn't like she was in the city or anything, so it's it's crazy how many people you can talk to and they're like, "Yeah, like my brother was in the NICU, my mom had NICU babies." How many are out there? Because a lot of people never used to talk about it. Like,
No. And I feel too we weren't in the era of people having kids. And so,
no,
obviously social media is such a big thing now.
yeah,
Everyone's in the age that is around ours that's having babies. And I think we're just so surrounded by it. It's like
hmm,
one of those things like when you're thinking about buying a car, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere, whereas you've never seen it
yes,
before, and then you become a preemie mom or a NICU mom, twin mom, and all of a sudden everyone is surrounded
everyone,
by you,
yeah,
right? And I think that does serve a purpose too, and the community is so important. And like you said, meet other twin moms, meet NICU moms, and like I said in my very first episode, I'll never say I completely understand what you've been through, but
no,
the relation and being able to unfiltered talk to another mom about the situations is so important, and it's not gonna be someone who's going to try to find the best advice for you.
Yes.
I'm
And
like,
I
I
think
don't know
that
what the right things to say is, and I'm not gonna kill myself trying to think of it.
but it like I think that like NICU moms or even like just like pregnancy problems and just like high risk, like there is a certain bond between people like you and I that someone with a perfect pregnancy just won't understand, I don't think. And not to say that they can't come have this conversation with us, because they absolutely can, and I will never not listen. But there's just like something about like the bond that you've gone through something, I've gone through something, and it's to do with something that you've created, like a life that you created. Like it's just such a special bond that you can like the nurses even like
Yeah.
I will never not be grateful for the nurses that advocated for me like while I was delivering, like while I was in the NICU.
They
That's
play
it.
such important parts, hey?
Yeah.
It's so true, and I feel like to yeah, just being there to you said before about something about birth trauma and how it's so heavy and it's a huge deal.
Mhm.
And a lot of the times people, you'll I'll talk about my birth trauma, like, I can't even imagine. You're like, yeah, it's an uncomfy thing to imagine if you were put
Mhm.
in a situation with your baby where you weren't sure if it was going to mean life or
Yeah.
not having your baby here. And until you have been in the situation or faced, like you said, what if I have to make a decision to choose one of these babies or
Mhm.
things like that adds a whole different thing to the pregnancy, the childbirth, and not that not every mom appreciates their babies. I am by no means saying that, but I
Mhm.
think when once you have that baby home after those, you try not to take anything for granted.
Yeah.
But then again, that toxic positivity where it's like, okay, if your baby's not sleeping or your baby's colicky and things like that, it's okay to grieve
Yeah.
what it life would be like without that, and also alongside being thankful that they're here.
Yeah. And that's that's like the best way that I've like heard of it is the toxic positivity. Like I know that I'm so thankful to have these two newborns in my house, but oh my gosh, like am I dying a little bit? I
Yeah,
don't sleep. Like it's it's something that when you don't go through it, you have no idea. And sometimes you just need someone to listen. I don't want any advice.
yeah,
I don't think you could give me any of the right advice necessarily. Even if you could tell me how to fix this situation, I'm probably not looking for that answer right now.
yeah. It's
But
just a holding space, right? And
yes.
feeling like someone has walked this journey before and they've made it
Mm,
through to the other side and
yeah.
we can do it. It's going to be hard as hell, but you can do
Yeah.
it. And two, I feel like if we had one of our best friends that had their first baby and they brought them home and they were going through it as a first time mom, we would never sit there and tell them it's wrong to feel that way.
No.
Whereas when you have experienced a negative outcome and now they're here, it's like, how can we sit here and tell ourselves you can't feel that way? That's a
Mhm.
wrong way to feel because you need to feel the happiness of it all.
Yes.
And the happiness can bring a lot of sadness right alongside it.
I almost like I was talking to Logan the other night because we have friends that are expecting and they have like these amazing healthy pregnancies. And I told him I was like I feel so selfish to say this, but I'm jealous like
Yep.
and I don't want to lessen their experience because they are going through their own challenges even though like baby is healthy and they are relatively healthy, like there's no high risk factors. They are still going through that journey. Like
Mhm.
your whole body changes. You don't sleep anymore when you're pregnant. Like things hurt that didn't hurt. And it's so hard for me to be like, that sucks because I went through this. But like my experience doesn't make their experience any less, and I need to remind myself that. And
Mhm.
there are people that have had much worse pregnancies than I have. I've had, like, such a happy ending in my story, and I need to remind myself that I didn't have it the worst. And even if my situation was less than someone else's, it's still something that I have trauma from.
Mhm.
And and everyone's journey is just so different. Like, and no one's is less than the next person.
Yeah, the jealousy really sits with me. I feel like that is a very common emotion in my world right now.
Yeah.
And after losing Cade, obviously, yeah, we did have a subsequent pregnancy in cases here. And still to this day, and even when I was pregnant with him, especially in between the two boys, if I seen a bump or I seen a pregnancy post, and I am like, I immediately got stone cold. And I
Mhm.
think it's a protection thing. And then once that left, I was almost angry that, okay, so
Yeah.
they're getting their story and I had mine. And then the jealousy rolled in. And it's like, well, why? Like,
Yeah.
why me again? I always circle back to the why me, and I have quite a few pity parties. Does not take away that I am happy for everybody
No.
around me, but it's almost, and two, I feel that when I'm happy for someone who has had perfect pregnancies and subsequent pregnancies, it's like, yeah, okay, that's amazing. And then when I meet a mom who's had a loss or they've had a very scary experience or birth trauma and things like that, and I just feel so much harder for them. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, and I know because they need it so badly. And
Yeah.
it's almost like I have all that fight in myself for them as well. And I don't think that's necessarily a wrong thing. I don't know if a lot of people would admit that they have those feelings. But
Yeah.
again, we're here to normalize. And so I'll be the
Yeah.
first to say it. And
Yeah.
it took me a long time because I was never a jealous person. I was never an angry person. I very
Yeah.
much believe that everything happens for a reason and it's going to be what it's going to be. And I specifically said that going into the birth with Kate. They said, "What's your birth plan?" I said, "I don't know. It's just going to be what's going to be." And oh my god, do I wish I had a fucking birth plan. Or like, like specifically said,
Yes.
"Someone, if you need to section me, just take me to the OR, like, I don't care."
Yeah.
And that has taken me, and I still very much am getting used to these feelings that are obviously within me and are not afraid to surface. And again, it's
Yeah.
being in that age where everybody's having babies. I'm absolutely surrounded by it. And I constantly go back and forth as to whether or not I want another one, specifically because I did not want my final story to go out the way I did. And
Yep.
on the other hand, being so scared to put myself in a position where I could get really hurt again.
I
And I,
think that's like that's a big thing is I think when people have 3 kids, a lot of people assume you're done. Like 3 is a very common
yep,
done number.
yep.
And for some reason, because we had twins, everyone always asks us if we're having more. And I'm at such a loss because I always imagined 3 pregnancies.
Mhm.
I also didn't want this. Like, not that I didn't want twins, but I didn't want to miss the birth of my children. I so specifically wanted to feel that again after Walker, and I wanted to breastfeed. I wanted the skin on skin, and I missed so much of that. I remember seeing videos and I was like, I didn't get to do that because I had twins and I was attached to a wall pump and I couldn't hold them and I couldn't just lay in bed and look at every inch of their body, all of the details. And I really struggle with, do I want a fourth or do I just want the experience of a baby? Like,
That is so true.
and so right now I have no idea what the future holds, if it holds more kids or if it holds just my 3 and I can be an awesome auntie to all of the kids to come.
I
But
know.
there is a lot that I feel like I missed and I like deeply am saddened that I did miss that.
I
I don't know.
wholeheartedly agree with you on that.
Yeah. I think the NICU as like I'm so glad that they were so well taken care of, but I also felt like I had to ask permission to hold my children. I also didn't never once I always see this in twin groups, and it makes me really sad, but I was never offered to hold them at the same time ever in the NICU, and, um, one of the nurses was just like, "Oh, like, I bet, like, from holding them together." I was like, "I've never held them together," and she was like, "What?" And I was like, "I have no idea how to get that baby out of that bassinet, hooked up to wires, and that baby out of that bassinet, and do the cords reach?" And she was like, "Oh, okay, well, we'll do that later in the day." And then she ended up like shift change. And I think that was like hard for me. I think I finally like went and got one baby, set it on my bed, went and got the other baby, and like tried to half scoop them up. And that was the first time. And it was like 30 seconds because then one needed to eat and get their NG tube.
Yeah.
But like that was also like they were like, "Yeah, like, the nurses helped assist me do skin to skin with both of them," and I was like, "Wait, what?"
And
Like,
that's a huge bonding thing, not only for you, but for the babies. Like,
they
they're
never
meant
got to
to
see
be snuggled in
together,
together.
and there
Oh,
was
that
one
breaks
nurse
my heart.
the one nurse, she Wilder was being a little bit fussy, and she came in and she put Wilder in Whitley's bassinet, and he calmed down instantly, and
They need that connection.
I didn't know you were allowed to do that," and she was like, "Nobody's done this yet?" And I was like, "No," and it was, like, 2 days before we left. And I was like, "They've been 3 weeks without each other, like 3 full weeks. They have not got to touch each other." And yeah, like, it was I remember, like, people being like, "I wanna hold them both," and I was like, "You don't get to because I never got to." Like, I was angry, and
Totally valid.
I
I
was
just
just like,
assumed that they
"Yeah,
would have been together with you
no."
in those
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, like, and yeah, like, I see it all the time in these twin groups, and I'm just like, "You are so lucky." Like, I didn't know how to get them together. I didn't know that I was allowed to hold them together, like,
But that
because there's
wasn't
so
your
many
job to
rules,
know.
right?
That's
Yeah,
your nurse's job, and yeah, I'm shocked.
and
I'm kind of
it's not
speechless.
like and I don't blame any of the nurses. I'm sure that they probably thought a nurse before them had done it, or that the nurse after them would do it or whatnot. Like, you can only get so much done on your shifts, but
Mhm. Just to
that,
even
like
have the conversation, right, and educate you that that
yeah,
is something that you can do.
yeah. There was just, like, so much, like, lack of communication, right? When there's 3 nurses a day or 2 nurses a day, and you're just like I think it was, like, finally, like, day 6, and one nurse was like, "We're gonna bath them, they have not had a bath," and I was like, "Okay, I'm not sure. Are we allowed to do that yet?" Like, I I feel
That's
like
the
they had to
thing,
ask
right?
permission for so much there, you're
Yeah.
not sure, like
And I loved my nurses,
but
yeah, who let me know that though, because I
mhm,
never wanted, and this could be that I'm in the nursing profession, I never wanted to step on their toes.
yeah,
And even though I'm their mom, and so often you're like, "Well, you're the mom, you know best." And then I would get myself into a situation where I was trying to say what I knew best about my baby, and I would be like they'd be like, "Yeah, okay, but whatever is happening is normal." I'm like, "Okay, but
yeah,
that's not my baby's normal." And so then if you hear that enough times, and so then
yeah.
I just started to get to the point where it's like, "Okay, I'm gonna do a bath tonight. Can you just get me what I need and I'll do it." And then
Oh,
I'll yell
that
at
is
her,
so
"Okay,
nice.
I'm gonna disconnect the cords now, like, he's fine," and I'll
Yeah,
watch him, but I feel like that was very hard too, is not necessarily feeling like the mom until you went home, and a lot of my nurses were okay, and they'd be like, "Oh, did you get a chance to change the bum?" Or,
um,
this and that, but it's such the relationship is hard
yeah.
there because you're
I the
both there for a purpose, and some of those
Yes.
purposes overlap. And it's hard, and I'm sure I can't even imagine being a NICU nurse and how many relationships and parents and parenting types
Yeah,
that you
that you
run
run
into,
into.
and so I do give them a lot of grace for that as well, but from the parent perspective too, it definitely can feel overwhelming, and I'm just, like, not a very I'm scared to ask for help, I think, sometimes and, like,
Yeah.
speak up, and so I almost just needed them to be like, "Okay, you can do this, this, and this." But then if
Yeah.
one nurse says and the next nurse is like, "You're not allowed to do that," I'm like, "Well, the last nurse said I could." And then
Excuse
I
me?
don't wanna get in
Since when?
trouble. I don't like getting in
Yes.
trouble. Then I sit in awkwardness for the rest of your shift, and I wanna cry.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I remember, like, the night that I went up to meet them for the first time, and the one nurse was like, "Do you wanna change his bum?" And I was like, "I can't get out of this wheelchair, ma'am. Like, nope. Like, sorry, but you're gonna have to do that because I can't even stand up right now." Like,
Give me some time to heal.
yeah.
I
I was,
remember
like,
when I went
still,
up
like, very high
yeah.
on drugs. I'm like,
Oh, I went up
I
to
don't
meet
even know if I should
Case.
hold them.
You're like, "I don't know if I trust myself."
Yeah.
I know, I went up to meet Case, and they don't know how you delivered, if you delivered vaginally or
Yeah.
section, they just care about your baby, and I forget what she asked me to do, and yeah, same thing, I was trying to get up, and, oh, slow moving and whatever, she's, "Oh, did you have a C-section?" I'm like, "Mhm." She's like, "Oh, well, never mind then," like,
Yeah.
but I never wanted to say no to anything just in case I was never offered the opportunity
Yeah.
again. They're like, "Oh, you wanna hold him?" I'm like, "I don't know, he's kinda small."
Yeah.
Like, am I
Oh,
allowed? And the
yeah.
hand hugs? Okay, I just
Oh,
talked to a mom about hand hugs the other day. Mm,
I
unless you're
loved
a NICU mom,
that.
you don't even understand.
No.
I remember what my best friend came in when Case was still really little, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, you can give him a hand hug and this and that." She's like looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm like "Okay, so you're gonna just, like" and nobody understood the size of him until they physically seen him because
Yeah,
pictures
'cause
blow everything up. The NICU showed me that pictures really do add 10 pounds, so if you ever feel like you look 10 pounds heavier in a photo, I fully support it, and they would come in and they would put their hand over him and then they would understand, and I'm like, it still makes me wanna tear up. I'm just like,
yeah,
"These little that was their little hug, and they
yes,
just wanted
and
the
that would cover
pressure."
their whole body, and it,
Ugh,
like, would comfort them so much, and you're like, "It's just my hand," but
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I could talk about this forever. There's so many components, and everybody's story is so different, and
yeah,
I really appreciate you, talking about the good things and being very open about the hard
yes.
times. Like, I
There's, like
really appreciate it.
I know. There's, like honestly, I could talk about this forever, and I think, like, Logan could too, and he started a file on his phone. He was like we were there at Easter and they provided us a Easter meal. So I like took a picture of him and we have like a whole family group chat. Like his whole entire mom's side were in this group chat. So I sent it. I was like, Easter dinner, because obviously we weren't getting a real Easter dinner. That was it. He was like, send that to me. I'll put it in my file. And I was like, what file? And he was like, oh, I started a file for like all of our NICU pictures. And we have like pictures of our room that we stayed in the border housing, the whole hospital, like all of our NICU
Stop.
pictures. Yeah, he made that. And I was like, that is so special, like, that he thought to do that. It's not something I thought about, and, like, so
Mhm.
now we have this file, and sometimes we'll just, like, put it up on the TV and go through it at night, like
I think it's
yeah.
so important too to reflect back. Like, I look at Case I'm like, I think I'm lying when I say you fit in our hand. And then I go
Yes.
back and look at photos. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, there was nothing to you. And in those
Yeah,
moments, I remember sitting there one day, I'm like, oh, my chunky little boy. And then I look at the photos. I'm like, you didn't have an ounce of fat on you. What was I
yeah,
talking about? But to reflect back and remind yourself how far you've come. And
yes.
just because a lot of the times I'm like, did that actually even happen? I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't know if that was real, and then just to kinda bring myself back to that and honor how much we've been through, and I think it can make those really hard times feel a little bit lighter
yeah.
and help you get through, but yeah, it's so funny. Just
I
yeah, I
love
feel like
having
I'm
those
making it up.
memories. Yeah,
Yes. Thank
I
God we
love
have that.
I'm so thankful for, like, all of our pictures in the NICU because I think I blocked a lot of it out and I can like go back and I have like a picture of like the back of Whitley's head and she had so much hair when she was born. And it's so dark, so like black. And people don't believe me because she lost all her hair at like 3 months and now it's growing back and it's getting long again. But I'm like, that girl had so much hair. And
Aw.
Wilder was born like blonde, which like is wild because I'm a brunette, Logan's a brunette. And like we were like, they're not even cousins. They don't look the same ethnicity.
Isn't that so funny?
Yeah, and I love seeing those memories and like being like, I can't believe they were that little. I can't believe how much hair she had. I can't believe how little hair he had. Like just like it's so neat to see because I don't necessarily remember it all just with everything that you go through.
Yeah, that would be one of my biggest pieces of advice would be take the pictures, take
Mhm.
the videos, get the little
Yeah.
sounds and everything. I wish I took so many pictures, but videos, I just maybe I necessarily thought to. I have a
Yeah.
few, and then in those, like just the little sounds that they make and
Yeah.
like just really capture those moments because one day you may want to look at them, you may not, but that's
Yeah.
something that I often do.
Yeah. I I think I like do it more so now to be like like how far we've come and like
Yeah.
we have like I she comes to our home and she evaluates how they're doing and what milestones they're meeting. I can't remember what she's called, but
Yeah.
and she does it and she goes like they're meeting all of their milestones and I'm like I'm just so proud of them that we were in the NICU and now we're here and like they're pulling themselves up on the couch. They're like clapping their hands, they're waving, like they're doing all these things and I'm just like I can't believe we're here. Like I never thought that we would make it out of this newborn phase. Like
Yeah. It's so amazing to see them change. It goes so fast, but
it does.
just being able to
Sometimes it doesn't feel
celebrate them.
very fast,
Oh,
but
I know. And then you look back, you're like, "Oh, okay. That was feels like forever ago." But in the
yeah.
moment, I know I remember before he was born, they prepared us for worst case scenario. And
Yeah.
now to see like he's right on par with his corrected age is just they're such little miracles.
Yes.
I
And
love it so much.
Case has got to be like 7 months now.
7
And so
months, 4 corrected.
or corrected. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think like I remember so super funny, but I was in a wedding party and Carissa was doing our makeup.
Okay, yeah.
And she was like, she was telling me how she had twins and she was in antepartum beforehand. And I was like, well, I stayed there. I was like, I know this girl from back home and she's in there right now. And she was like, oh, is it Alexa? And I was like, yeah, like just like talking a little bit about you. And I think she goes 10 minutes later, oh my God, Alexa had her baby. I was like, wow. Like, it was just so weird that it would like happen to be that day because I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
like 2 days before that you had posted that you had gestational diabetes. And I was like, hey,
I
I've
was
been there.
diagnosed that morning. We chatted. I
Yes.
went out for lunch, came back in labor and sectioned at 1:04 AM when my husband
Like,
got there.
oh, like and I just think that's so crazy. Like that it's such a small world. Like I
It
had no
really
idea
is.
who Carissa was before this wedding. And then one of the girls was like, she's just like you. She had 3 babies and she has twins. And I was like, oh, and so we're like chatting about the NICU. And then I was like, she was like, yeah, like I was like in the hospital before I had the twins. Um, and then I was like, well, I know like someone staying in that ward right now. Like I was just like, I don't know her well or anything, but she always shares on Instagram. And she was like, is it Alexa? And I was like, yeah.
That's funny because the day after I was admitted, she shows up with like this big basket of baby clothes and this and that, like preemie stuff, snacks,
Yeah.
Starbucks
Oh,
booster juice. I'm like, oh my gosh! But and
yeah.
she said she's like, I have like PTSD walking back in this unit, and the charge nurse that was on that day was a charge nurse when she was actively in there. She's like, do you remember me? I'm not here because I'm pregnant this time. She's like, she probably didn't want to see me either.
Yeah. Oh, like I think like it's just wild like the fact that like I could associate like Carissa to you and then like I'm listening to this podcast and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I also follow Kylie and she
Mhm.
is like she just gave birth again." Like I'm just like, this is so neat to hear everyone's stories and how more common it is because we're obviously going to find our community, but like knowing people that have gone through what we have gone through and finding people that I have no idea who they are, but I'm like, I know you now because I know your story and I follow
Yeah.
along because this is what I want to know. Like,
Yeah. I know.
just
The
things that you
community
can relate
aspect is
to.
so important. Even
Yeah.
Case's chiropractor messaged me yesterday and she's like, I know Kylie from high school sports, and like to hear the raw version of the story from her. And she follows her on Instagram and whatever, but it's like to hear
Yeah.
the raw version of these stories, and they're people that we know kind of well or we've gotten to know over social media. And
Hmm.
obviously we share so much of the journey that you just feel like you
Yeah.
know it all, and then to hear the entire story, or as much as we can recall in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the world is such a small place, and the birth trauma community and
Yeah.
the NICU community specifically and things like that, it's just
And the
yeah.
nurses that like make this impact, like I honestly don't think that I could have like made it out of the NICU without like how positive and amazing like the nurses are.
Yeah.
Like, and how hard it must be for them to go to work and like maybe deal with a baby that isn't going to make it, but still just
Mhm.
like this positive light that you can look at in a time that you're struggling so much.
They are such special people.
Yeah,
I
I
will
absolutely,
forever be thankful.
yeah,
And I
forever
think you become
thankful for
so much
them.
attached too, because it's like you're the reason like my baby got to come home. Like you did all of these
Mhm,
things for them, and obviously the neonatologists and the whole medical team played parts too,
mhm.
but the person you see all day every day is the nurse.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
And
so
like,
special.
obviously, you see the doctors when they do their rounds, or maybe if something is going wrong, they come in, but like, that nurse is sitting there watching over your baby all day.
Mhm.
Like, whether you're there or not there, they're still watching. Like,
Yeah. They're like their second moms.
yep. One of the nurses was like, "You'll never get this good of babysitting again. So if you wanna go for supper, go for supper." Like, and I was
I
like,
had a
"Oh,
couple say that too. I'm like, you know what? You're probably right.
yeah. You are absolutely right. You know what you're doing. You do this all day
Right?
long."
Yeah.
Like,
You've been around.
yeah, which I just love. Like,
I
it did.
know.
I think that if I were to have another baby and for some unfortunate reason, like we're back in the NICU, I would not be scared. I truly believe that the Royal Alex and like the NICU there is like the best place to be. I don't think I'll ever have a baby not there now. And like just I'm so comforted by their team, the doctors there and how like well they take care of you, how much they observe and the like, the scenarios that they've gone through, it's just comforting to know that they're ready.
I totally agree. I would
Yeah.
recommend it to anybody.
Mhm.
It's
When
such a
someone
good
tells me they're
experience.
delivering in their small town, I'm like, "I'm scared."
I panic immediately.
Yes.
And oh, I remember what I was gonna say earlier now. You said about your husband and, like, wanting to get out of the city and stuff like that and not be in that area. I
Mhm.
still feel like that now. Like, if I have to drive there or if I listen
Yeah.
to similar music or the exact music I would listen to when I was going to visit him, I get
Yeah.
so panicky. I'm like,
Mhm.
"I am not enjoying this." And even if I'm sitting, like, in my living room listening to the song that I listened to when I was going to visit him, because I had a
Yeah.
pump up song that just made me feel a little bit lighter, and then
Yeah.
I just feel, like, gross. I'm like, "Ugh, am I heading back there?" Like, it's crazy what all of those things can hold on to,
Yeah.
and I really haven't been to that area of Edmonton since.
So, we went to, the CFR in October, and it's at Rogers Place, Rogers Center, whatever
Yep.
it's called. Obviously, like, we could see Rogers from our NICU room. They called it, like, the suite because it was right on the end and it had the most beautiful view, thank God, because it was, like
Right?
when we got there, I was like, "This is heaven." Like, this is so nice. It just, like, made that stay a little bit easier, but we were downtown, and after the rodeo, I said, "Can we please drive by the hospital?" And he, like, looked at me and he was like, "Yep." Like, I know exactly, like, it brought back so many feelings and emotions, but he was just like, we drove by, like, right at the Robyn's Pavilion doors, and he goes, "Should we just, like, go in and go up to our room?" Like,
Feels like we're welcome there at this point.
yeah.
Oh,
He was like,
thinking
"I would
about
not
the
feel awkward at all," like, I was like, "No, because, like, you walked that hallway, like, you we lived there, right?" Like,
yeah, all of the entrances just freak me out. 'Cause the first entrance, I walked through the main doors when right before my water broke, and then I walked through the Robin's Pavilion as I went into labor. I'm like,
yeah.
the whole place just holds way too many memories for me.
Yes.
I can't get away from them no matter what angle I take it at.
No matter what, the border rooms are just not it.
No, I see the outside of the building, I'm like, "Ugh, gross." Like, even the outside doesn't look great.
Yeah. Like,
And then once you know what the inside entails, you'll stay away forever. Oh my gosh.
oh, I didn't know you could leave a review because I might just go do that. Like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah. Well,
And,
hopefully
like,
I don't know what it looks like now, but hopefully they
yeah,
actually were able to update it a bit, and if you're listening to this and you're gonna be at the Royal Alec and you are opting for the border room, I pray your experience is way better than ours.
yes. Maybe take the Ronald McDonald House,
Yeah,
but
it's a fun
yeah.
option.
I remember, like, the nurses, like, really advocating for the Ronald McDonald House, but for me, like, I just couldn't fathom leaving the hospital. So I was like, "Just put us in this border room." And they were like, "Probably not a good idea. Like, we don't really like to send moms there." And
Mhm.
I just couldn't understand why they were saying that. But now I
Until
get it.
you got in there, yeah.
Until you cross the hallway and take that elevator.
Oh, I can hear the elevator. I can see smell the elevator.
It's so bad.
I don't know if that'll ever leave me. Well, thanks for
No.
so much for taking the time to sit with me. I really appreciate it. And I myself learned so much about your story today. And it was
Oh,
such an honor to hold space for you today.
yes, honestly, I feel so honored that you asked me to come on the podcast because I really didn't think that I had that much to talk about. And then you talk about it and you're like, "Yeah, okay, I kind of went through some stuff."
You were so
But
cute when you're like, I can't believe you think my story's important enough to share, however you worded it. I'm like,
yeah, like,
oh my God. I was literally washing my hair this morning thinking about that. And I was like, as if you thought that. And I'm like, I need to mention that everybody's story is worth talking about.
yeah.
And
No,
whether
I
it's for
can't
you
wait.
or someone else, like,
Yes. I can't
uh,
wait to listen to, like, all of the episodes. Like, this is just, like, something that I think I didn't even know could be put into podcast form, and, like, this is something that I just hold so near and dear to my heart, the NICU and the NICU mamas, and I'm so glad
aw.
that you started this, like, out of everybody, like, I'm so happy that it was you that did this.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Please take a moment and on whatever app you're listening to us on, press that follow button to stay up to date with all future episodes. If you or someone you know are interested in being a guest on the Beyond the Birth Story podcast or a sponsor, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at Beyond the Birth Story podcast and send a message or fill out that contact form. I would love to connect with you. As always, remember to be gentle, kind, and hold space for yourself when you need it.